Welcome back to Normal Ireland. It's Monday, and I feel like I haven't made an appearance in a while. If anyone doesn't know, Monday's supposed to be my show, so I hope you've all missed me. I'm Sarah Dallal, and I'm joined by the wonderful and insightful Lewis. How are you today?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you? I had a lovely weekend. I was with Curtis. We went to the Palestine March on Saturday. We interviewed Jeremy Corbyn, met with Chris Kunzler, if anybody knows him from social media, and had a really active weekend. And then me and my partner and Curtis and his partner went out for a lovely drink and some food on the
Nice.
Sunday. So I had a lovely weekend, and obviously there's a
Brilliant.
lot of news stories today, and I've got a lot to say.
Yeah, he's got a lot to say, and I can't
Do
wait to get Lewis's insight. And in
riled up.
classic Lewis fashion, there were tech issues, not on my part, but on Lewis's. Joking, it was me. Right, anyway, coming up on tonight's show, we have got BBC shows Gary Lineker, the red card over anti-Semitism claims, Israel bombs Gaza but wins Eurovision silver, and UK neo-Nazis are prosecuted for plotting attacks on mosques. That's a story that was from last week, but I think it's really, really important to talk about. As always, though, remember to like the stream, and if you're not a subscriber, then please hit that button. Help us reach our goal of 40,000 subscribers by the end of the year. I'm really optimistic as ever. So yeah, I think that will happen. And we will be getting to your comments at the end with our producer. So please make sure that you're busy in the chat so we can respond to them later. But on to our first story. So, Gary Lineker, England legend, BBC Golden Boy, is walking early from Match of the Day. But why? Because he reposted a 2-minute explainer critiquing Zionism, unaware that it contained a cartoon rat, a racist trope that was previously used in Nazi propaganda. He apologised unreservedly, deleted the post, and said plainly, "I'd never knowingly share anything anti-Semitic." Let's have a look.
Hi everyone, some personal news. Last week I shared a post here on Instagram that contained an emoji that has awful connotations. Unfortunately, I did not see the emoji. If I had, I would never ever have shared it. The minute I was made aware, I quickly deleted the post and went on to make an apology. I would like once again to say I'm sorry unreservedly for the hurt and upset caused. It was a genuine mistake and oversight, but I should have been more diligent. I know that. I've stood up for minorities and humanitarian issues and against all forms of racism all of my life, including, of course, anti-Semitism, which I absolutely abhor. There's no place for it and never should be. So I think it's best for all concerned that I step down from BBC presenting duties altogether and not do next season's FA Cup or World Cup. The final day of the Premier League season on Sunday will be my last show. It's been a pleasure and a huge privilege working with the BBC for 30 years, especially hosting Match of the Day, a programme that is so close to my heart and an integral part of my life. I'd like to thank all of the quite brilliant, talented and lovely people both in front and behind the camera that I've worked alongside for 3 decades. You're an absolute best. The relationship with the BBC has been long and wonderful, but it's the right time for the organisation and myself to go our separate ways. Thank you also to all of you for your incredible support and love over so many years. It means the world to me. I'll see you all on Sunday.
I mean, as heartfelt as that was, that apparently wasn't enough. The BBC's top brass, yes, the same BBC chaired until recently by the Tory donor Richard Sharp, rebuked him publicly. Director General Tim Davie barked afterwards and said this. The BBC's reputation is held by everyone, and when someone makes a mistake, it costs us. A petition launched by the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism pulled in over 10,000 signatures demanding that he be sacked. And whilst he was already planning to step back after this season, now he's gone altogether. FA Cup, 2026 World Cup, the lot. His final match of the day airs this Sunday. But let's be real. This wasn't about an image. This was about Gaza, about Lineker daring to amplify Palestinian voices, about him retweeting criticisms of Israel's military onslaught and refusing to be cowed. The rat cartoon, it was from a pro-Palestinian account attacking Zionism, not Jewish people. And I'm going to say it again. Zionism, not Jewish people. It feels like deja vu. Last year, Lineker was suspended for comparing Suella Braverman's anti-refugee rhetoric to the 1930s Germany. BBC bosses caved then too, only to reverse it when his entire sports team walked out in protest. So let's talk about the real danger. Not anti-Semitism, which must be fought always, by the way, but the weaponization of it to crush dissent. We've seen it before in the Labour purge under Corbyn and now again with Lineker. Speak out for Gaza and suddenly you're smeared, isolated and done. Lewis, I want to bring you in. The BBC claims neutrality but acts like a state broadcaster. It muzzles Lineker for defending Palestinians but tolerates ex-Tory MPs and government talking heads on air like it's nothing. Where's the balance?
Well, there is no balance, is there? And this is what's the frustrating thing. And when it comes to balance with the BBC, and I'm frustrated with the media when it comes to this across all boards, like everyone from even Channel 4, who have been slightly better than other news channels, is that we're so quick to jump on people who make a mistake like Gary. I genuinely believe it's a mistake. I do. And by the way, there are people out there who lots of, I would say, leftist pro-Palestinian people support, who are genuine anti-Semites. And I call these out. Anybody who likes Candace Owens and thinks she's pro-Palestine, she is not. She is anti-Semitic. And we will stand here and call out people who are anti-Semitic. We don't care how big their support is. We will call them out. Gary is not one of those people. And what's frustrating with this idea of balance is that in these conversations, whether it's in Question Time or BBC News, we constantly forget to add context to things, and it frustrates me. The fact that when we have these conversations, we have got a record up to about 500 different instances of Israeli ministers, cabinet ministers, and Israeli figures throughout Israel and other pro-Israel supporters literally inciting genocide. Not something that could be interpreted as inciting genocide or harm or war crimes, literally inciting it. And then we forget that Benjamin Netanyahu is currently on trial for his life, and that's the reason why the war is ongoing, because he wants to stay in power. But for some reason, every time we have the conversation about Gaza, about the West Bank, about any of these occupied territories, or anything that Israel's doing, we somehow forget the context from which this war is happening, who is leading this war. But heaven forbid if somebody reposts something on social media which has a rat emoji in it. And I get it. And what's been interesting is that I only learned about the rat thing about a year ago. And I think just before we had this call as well, some of us were talking and saying, I didn't know the rat thing was associated. And I think that's fair. There are many tropes which people are well aware of, things that are strictly anti-Semitic, right? We could talk about, the classic conspiracy theories of who controls the world, banking, media, all these conspiracy theories which are ridiculous in many ways. However, there are certain things out there which are anti-Semitic, but not knowingly. And the fact that he gets this media storm and this media backlash and this pressure, when you've got people out there like Suella Braverman, when she was in power, using replacement theory, which is anti-Semitic, using the term cultural Marxism, again, anti-Semitic conspiracy theory. Just Google that term. Literally the first thing that comes up, this is an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory. And she doesn't lose her job. She loses her job over something else, twice, might I add. It's just frustrating. It is incredibly, incredibly frustrating. And I've got so much more to say about this, but I'll let you go again because I will just keep going.
No, I'd want you to keep going, but you're absolutely right. And I think we speak about all the time on this show, right? There's conflation between Zionism and Judaism, and people are struggling to discern between the two. So I guess my next question to you is this weaponized outrage? Like, how do we actually distinguish real anti-Semitism from attempts to stifle criticism of Israeli policy, and who actually benefits from that confusion in the end?
Yeah, so this is the hardest part when it comes to anti-Semitism specifically, is there's the old conspiracy of, Jewish people control the world in the media. Not true at all in any way. There are circles of influencers. There are people in power who have obviously sympathies towards Israel, but the idea that they directly control it in any way is completely ridiculous. However, Benjamin Netanyahu, again, go back to my previous point, is currently on trial in Israel for corruption and bribery linked to media news channels in Israel for working with them to get favorable coverage for himself, his party, and his wife, and also to push down competition of news channels who don't like him. So yes, when you talk about these things, you have to be specific, you have to be nuanced, because there are things out there. Currently, Benjamin Netanyahu and his team are currently also being investigated for another corruption trial related to Qatar. Nothing to do with Donald Trump's £400 million jet, by the way. It's to do with Qatar paying Benjamin Netanyahu's team money to them to go to journalists. One from the Jerusalem Post has been accused, and a few other people, to give Qatar favourable coverage. But this is not anything different than what any other government has done, past or present, right? Like, these things happen all the time. Governments work with media, governments influence things. But because obviously you have this tied notion of anti-Semitism into certain tropes, it makes it harder to navigate these conversations. And if you don't know the specifics and the actual details, it's very easy to be accused of being anti-Semitic unless you know how to navigate those conversations. And it is very hard to, because these things aren't really often reported in Western media in many ways. Most people, I think, are aware Benjamin Netanyahu is maybe on trial, but most people don't know actually for what. And this is where you need to be really careful, because things that you say can sound like classic anti-Semitism if you don't know how to explain it to people. And this is where things get frustrating. And you have to kind of tiptoe, and you have to be careful, and you have to be nuanced. And one slip up, especially from somebody like Gary Lineker, is going to be, it's going to have 1,000 spotlights on it. And that's the issue, and that's the problem that we have.
Completely agree with you, and I'll keep reiterating it. People need to learn to discern between Zionism and Judaism. And obviously, amidst this whole Gary Lineker story, it seems that people are really, really against him. I want us to check out this video from Jonathan Sakadotti. I think I'm saying his name right. Hopefully, I am. He's a journalist, and he called into the LBC. Let's check out the video.
Television or on the radio or on Twitter to commentate about the World Cup or the Euros. Gary Lineker ought to learn that lesson, just keep his mouth shut. Not because he's embarrassing the BBC, because he's embarrassing himself. The guy is really thick, as far as one can tell. He claims he didn't know the picture of a rat would be offensive to Jews, after he also said that Suella Braverman's language some time ago, talking about immigrants, was reminiscent of Nazi Germany. So he can't have it both ways. Either he thinks he knows about that era of history, or he doesn't. But the idea of Jews as rats, and never mind that, the video itself was shocking, full of lies, full of rubbish.
But to employ language, Mr. Sacerdoti, and this is your view, you're okay, so he's thick and he's stupid. Does that mean he can't have an opinion then? Can only intelligent people have opinions?
No, thick people are welcome to their opinions. They're even welcome to share them. But he was enjoying, what was it, 1.6 million 1.4 million of money, which is taken, at the threat of a criminal record, I think, from people who are paying the BBC licence fee.
Oof. Up pops Johnny on the LBC branding Gary as thick. Like, being a former England captain, a multilingual broadcaster and fearless humanitarian somehow renders you unqualified to have an opinion. Sorry, but if we're handing out tests on intelligence before people can speak on Gaza, half of Westminster should be rendered mute. This is the same tired elitist drivel that says, stick to football, Gary, we don't need your opinion. But let's be honest, what they really mean is don't challenge power. Because Lineker didn't say anything thick. He said something dangerous to those invested in keeping this debate one-sided. And now, instead of debating the content of his message, they're attacking the man, hoping we won't notice the moral cowardice of that move. Lewis, I want to bring you in after that video and get your reactions. But what does the backlash against Gary Lineker's political commentary reveal about societal attitudes towards public figures who step outside their traditional roles to engage in activism?
Yeah, it shows so much, because when we see the stories and footage and information that we get from Gaza, from the West Bank, and anywhere else that Israel is committing atrocities, we don't have the same knee-jerk reaction. I think the public do, but I think the way certain pundits, certain figures, certain people in the media, certain politicians will obviously shine a spotlight on the people that they oppose and the enemies that they have, right? We see these horrific stories, and again, I'll just tell it, right? Does everybody remember the humanitarian workers that were found in a mass grave just early last month? There was 2 witnesses to that, right? One of them was a father who was walking in the area with his 12-year-old son. His name was Mohammed al-Barawadi, and they were the only 2 witnesses. They blindfolded the father, didn't blindfold the son, made the son, 12-year-old, watch the executions of 3 waves of humanitarian workers, and then they were eventually released. After Israel was caught lying about what happened, they were obviously embarrassed for the entire world because they lied and they got caught. Just yesterday, the 12-year-old boy was assassinated on a fishing boat. just off of the coast of Gaza. Coincidence that the 12-year-old boy, the only eyewitness to the mass grave found in Gaza, was assassinated. I can tell that story and I can scream it to the camera and people will be outraged. It will never make it. That story will not be in Western media. It will not be. It was reported on the Middle East Eye. It was reported on in a few other outlets from that region. But that story, the follow-up from the humanitarian workers, will never make it into Western media. So people can't even be outraged at the right things unless a miracle happens and one of these stories finally gets out, which a few of them have since October 7th. And again, what frustrates me is that you don't get the outrage from the other side when certain things happen with certain people, especially when we reflect it. And a few people have commented on this as well with Islamophobia. Doesn't have the same strength because it can't be weaponized in the same way, the way it was weaponized against lots of people, everything from Corbyn, which there's no point going into right now. But it doesn't have the same strength. And any other type of, ism or phobia in any way does not carry the same strength that is weaponized when it comes to anti-Semitism because of the sensitivity around the things like the Holocaust. And obviously the history that goes with that and the history that we've all participated in contributing towards the oppression and hatred of Jews for centuries. That is just a fact.
Yeah.
But for some reason, any other group, does not carry the same outrage. And it's incredibly frustrating.
It is frustrating. It is. And I feel like I could speak about this for a really long time, but there is one thing I want us to just unpack really quickly. But this whole idea of BBC's impartiality, how does this make the BBC look if they're kind of trying to push Gary Lineker, or they pushed Gary Lineker out of his role at the BBC? Are they actually impartial, or is that a stupid question to ask?
What's interesting is there's impartiality at two levels here. There's two types of impartiality that we're talking about. So when Gary Lineker got caught up in his previous scandal to do with the same topic, I don't think last time he was putting anything out which was considered anti-Semitic. It was just very pro-Palestine, and people were calling into the idea of impartiality because he works at the BBC. So the BBC changed their rules on social media, saying that any of these personalities, no matter where you work, that could include obviously sport, whether it's on, I don't know, another area which is related to the news, you're not allowed to essentially talk about it unless it's your speciality, and also you have to be impartial still while you're presenting yourself online. And because Gary Lineker, the social media post was the 2 minutes of explaining Zionism. It was obviously a very pro-Palestinian, very left-leaning approach to Zionism. Not everybody would agree on it. John Sopel was talking about this on the News Agents just earlier today, that apparently part of the row isn't necessarily the rat emoji in the corner of the screen. It's actually more about the fact that he's broken the impartiality rules. But at the same time, then there's the argument about how impartial are the BBC being on this entire topic, but now they're in a fight, or the fight's over now, with Gary Lineker about his impartiality as a sports news presenter on the BBC. So it's kind of annoying because it seems like they're holding Gary Lineker to a higher standard about his impartiality than the 2 years worth of criticism that the BBC has got about its partiality towards this topic specifically. So it's very layered, it's very frustrating, and there's been some good reporting on how the BBC have massively failed on this topic. And again, there's been some good moments from the BBC. Victoria Derbyshire's had a few good moments. There have been good moments from the BBC on this topic, but it is few and far in between.
Yeah, I mean, great analysis. I think it's probably a good time to move on to our next story. So Eurovision happened on the weekend. Israel came second at Eurovision 2025, and people are not having it. Yuval Raphael's New Day Will Rise, performed by a survivor of the October 7th Nova Festival attack, won the public vote with 297 points. But thanks to a dismal jury score of just 60, she landed just behind Austria, who took the crown. Cue the outrage, the confusion, and cries of rigging. Spain and Ireland, two of Israel's harshest critics on Gaza, handed her significant public points. People are asking, how does that make sense? Are Europeans really voting with their hearts or their hashtags? Here's the setup. Under Eurovision rules, viewers can vote up to 20 times per device. I feel like I sound like Graham Norton a little bit when I say this part. For 99 pence a go. That's a lot of influence if you've got the cash, the coordination, or the political motivation. Reports now suggest organised bulk voting by pro-Israel groups may have skewed the televote, especially in countries where public sentiment was heavily pro-Palestine. The European Broadcasting Union insists their systems can detect vote manipulation, but no detailed data has been released. And in a contest where Russia was banned over Ukraine, Israel's presence naturally sparks fury. Over 1,000 Swedish artists, 72 former contestants, and thousands of protesters called for their exclusion. Spain's own broadcaster aired the message: when it comes to human rights, silence is not an option. And yet, inside the arena, boos, cheers, protests, even paint throwing, all drowned out by the pop spectacle. Behind the glitz, one question lingers. If this contest is actually about unity and music, how did a state bombing Gaza walk away with Europe's sympathy vote? Lewis, break it down for me, please. Did Israel cheat the public vote, or is this more about perception and coordinated influence?
Well, I made a video about this on my own TikTok with a lot of backlash because, from what I can see, I don't think they've cheated. It's not a case of cheating. It's just a case of lots of pro-Israel groups being massively coordinated. And how do I know this personally? Is because I sign up to a lot of emails from a lot of these organizations. I use the example in my video of We Believe in Israel, which Luke Akehurst, we would have to talk about him. I don't know if he's still a part of it technically now, but obviously he was running it for years up until becoming an MP. They have been sending out emails for months trying to coordinate this, making sure that people vote, making sure that people organize parties and all of this. When you combine that with the fact that most people who are passionate about this topic when it comes to Israel, Gaza, they didn't watch, they didn't participate. So you've already got a lot of people who would not vote for Israel and therefore vote for other countries out of the mix. Then when you actually look at how the voting breaks down, a lot of unusually what usually happens in Eurovision is that there are a few favorites amongst lots of countries, and the votes will be massively concentrated at the top. That's not necessarily what happened this time. The votes were very spread out. But because the way that they were spread out, and because there are organizations out there who will make sure that while everyone's boycotting it and everyone who is pro-Israel is organized, and these aren't just necessarily like Jewish communities or Jewish organizations in countries around Europe. These are other pro-Israel groups. Luke Akehurst is not Jewish, and he runs a pro-Israel organization. Right? These people exist. And they make sure that everybody's watching, that everybody's voting, that everybody's family and friends are voting, and they're making sure that every single person is voting the maximum amount of times that they can. Whereas if you just think about the casual viewer who might, they might know what's going on in the Middle East, they might not pay too much attention, they're watching Eurovision, they see Norway or Austria performing well, and they might, vote on the app one or two times. The people who are supporting Israel are not doing that. They're, bolstering, organizing, making sure everyone's voting to the absolute 100% maximum in every way that they can. I don't think this ties back to any sort of idea that it's centrally controlled or organized by Israel in any way. I think this is how a lot of pro-Israel organizations operate. They do a lot of their own things. I've had emails for the last week or so from We Believe in Israel telling me to try and oust Gary Lineker because they're organized. They make sure that people sign up and protest and send letters, and they give the results on it as well. And they're quite successful. They will say, we've got 5,000 people to complain to the BBC about Gary Lineker. I just made that up. I'm just using it as an example. But they're organized. That's essentially what it is. I got accused of anti-Semitism in my video, saying I was tying into the worldwide Jewish organization running the world conspiracy theory, which is obviously a stretch in many ways, but it's just very true. These people are very organized in many ways across their multiple organizations across multiple countries. And I think it worked out as like, they only got like 15% of those votes, but because of the way like the proportional percentage of the votes works, yada yada yada, they ended up getting stacked so high. That's from what I understand, unless anybody else in the comments wants to contradict me in any way.
I don't know.
Sorry, that went on a bit.
No, I don't mind. Honestly, talk away. I just have this thing where I ad lib in the back, like, but it's just, I do that maybe to not forget what I want to say. But is it not common sense though, Lewis? Like, why? Call me controversial, and maybe people can criticize me in the comments. Why Israel even allowed to be in Eurovision after everything that's happened? Like, is it not common sense to just ban them the same way that Russia had been banned? Then, let me show you this article, because the next day, right after Eurovision took place, and I did watch Eurovision. I've been watching it since I was a kid. So guilty pleasure, but also now I'm not going to watch it. I think it's important for me to boycott that place. But right after Eurovision took place, this article emerged from Sky News. More than 100 people killed in latest Israeli strikes on Gaza, says medics. The Hamas-run health ministry says airstrikes have forced the closure of the main hospital serving people in northern Gaza. So over more than 100 people being killed right after Eurovision takes place, right after Israel has managed to get second place. Lewis, it's kind of like asinine to think that any of this is okay. People will be like, but it's just Eurovision. Like, why does it matter? Why do you even care? But Eurovision stands 10 toes down in the belief that it's apolitical. Can it really claim to be that when one country gets a stage whilst dropping bombs on another?
I have good news and bad news. Which one would you like first?
Give me the bad so we can end on a good note.
Okay. So obviously the bad news is that this is the way the rules are. So Eurovision, for anybody who just doesn't know, it's organized through countries' public funded broadcasters. So that's why you won't see certain countries being involved, because they don't have a public broadcaster. Public broadcasters who are funded by the government, obviously in many ways tied to government policy, which is why like organizations like the BBC won't ever like push the genocide thing, because it hasn't been adjudicated, it hasn't been said by the the government, yada yada yada. So the bad news is that because it's the government who are doing these atrocities, and the public broadcaster in Israel is being objective in their reporting, and I will come to that in a moment because it ties into the good news, I promise, is that you don't punish the country, you punish the public broadcaster, which is what happened with Russia. Russia would technically still be allowed to be in Eurovision if they were like independent broadcaster for Russia who weren't pushing Russian propaganda and therefore breaking the European broadcasting rules. Israel has not broken the European broadcasting rules. I'm not saying this is good or bad. I'm just saying that is the bad news, is that these are the rules that are set out. They maybe need reviewing or changing, because how do you adjudicate when a country's doing something bad? We all know what Israel's doing, but because it hasn't been adjudicated, it's like, who then makes that decision? Because these are public broadcasters who are funded by the government. So that's where it's tied up. The good news is the Israeli government and Benjamin Netanyahu hate their public broadcaster because they do more objective reporting and they hold the government accountable. They're trying to sell it off right now. And if they do, Israel will no longer be in Eurovision because they will no longer have a public broadcaster. So,
I mean, that is good news. I'm glad we ended on that note. And I think maybe just one final question then, Lewis, just on all of that. I mean, I find it interesting because we do see all of it's nice to know the technicalities, because for people like me that probably don't know the technicalities, it's insightful. But I'd assume that because of the documentation of what's happening in Gaza, we are seeing these things happen in front of us, the onslaught of people in Gaza being attacked day in and day out. It's like, wouldn't it not be common sense to just get rid of them, but get rid of Israel from Eurovision? But it's a little bit more complicated than that. But with Eurovision, is this possibly a wake-up call that even culture is now an arena for soft power and narrative wars?
Yeah, it absolutely is in so many ways. You can see an obvious spike in the support for Israel through Eurovision, because if you look at their performance pre-October 7th, yes, they won it in, was it 2019? Netta, Not Your Toy. It's a very good, objectively, it's a good song. It's very catchy. But a few years after that, before October 7th and years before that, they didn't perform very well. Their voting that they got from the public around Europe wasn't very good. Some years it was okay, but most years it just wasn't very good. But obviously, it's very interesting how consistently since October 7th, where there's been 2 Eurovisions, that their public support is absolutely bolstered, that the people who support Israel are massively organized, and it is a form of soft power, because I feel like the idea of Israel winning, coming in second and almost winning in the previous couple of years shows, people who are watching it might think, well, there's a lot of public support for Israel. Maybe what people say sometimes online or sometimes in the news about them isn't so bad. Like, why would they get so much support, right? So I do feel like it is a type of soft power. And I was reading I can't remember if it was Haaretz or Jerusalem Post, some Israeli media last week, that the government have just launched a program to start trying to fund influencers around the world to come to the illegal settlements and promote them and stuff like that. So yeah, they do media pushes globally. They spend money on these things. Whether they've spent any money or resources on Eurovision specifically, I don't know. There's no evidence for it that I've seen, but they do other things to push their culture through other mediums like social media. They want to start paying influencers, and through other methods and means as well. And we know that they were using YouTube ads during the live streaming and all of these things to try and promote people voting for this candidate. So I think it is incredibly powerful in lots of ways because it can kind of undermine actually what is going on and make, you know, Israel seem like a better and nicer place. When you see kind of like what you would imagine to be, you know, very liberal kind of fun pop music on TV, it might like make them seem perhaps a little bit softer. Perhaps, I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really great response, actually. Thank you, Lewis. So before we move on to our final story, we have a video to show you.
For the last 45 years, there has been a massive transfer of wealth from the working and middle classes to the top 1%. Billions of pounds have been taken from the workers and handed to the economic elites. In 2008, the world came to a standstill. The market had failed. Capitalism was in crisis. Yet 16 years on, nothing has changed. The bankers weren't jailed, the banks were bailed out, ordinary people lost everything. It's 2025 and we are now reckoning with a Labour Party that seeks to implement a Tory agenda. We face rising right-wing forces, more division, more misinformation. Yet no one in the mainstream media wants to talk about the real issue, the economic elites who have increased their wealth while the rest of us have become poorer. This isn't just a crisis of inequality, it's a crisis of democracy. The rich aren't just getting richer, they're owning everything. We are facing a global oligarchy and nothing is being done. Why? Because of our media. The same oligarchs who hoard wealth also control our press and now our social networks. This is why independent media isn't just important, it's necessary. It's why we're calling on your support. Turn Left is an organisation run by 5 volunteers working around our full-time jobs. Your contributions have already made a huge difference, whether by covering rallies, producing vox pops and interviews, or upgrading our equipment. That's all possible because of you. But we can do so much more. We can be far more ambitious. So head over to turnleftmedia.co.uk/support, become a monthly supporter, or give a one-off donation. If you want to fight back against the billionaire class, then help us build a media for people, a media for planet, a media for socialism. Smash the oligarchs. Join Turn Left.
Yeah, so that's a great video. So that's turnleftmedia.co.uk/support for a monthly or one-off donation. Also, like, don't put yourself out if you aren't able to do so, but you can become a YouTube member as well for just 99 pence. But on to our final story. I'm conscious of time. So last week, 3 neo-Nazi men had been charged with terrorism offences after building plans for an attack on Muslims in the UK, planning to kill and torture their victims. Right-wing extremism in this country has gotten far out of hand, and this is yet another example. Brogan Stewart and Marco Pizzatu, both age 25, and Christopher Ringrose, 34, were convicted at Sheffield Crown Court on the 14th of May. Detective Chief Superintendent James Dunkerley gave a statement to the press saying Stewart, Pizzatu, I hope I'm saying his name correctly, and Ringrose have today been rightfully convicted of multiple terrorism offences. They were a group that espoused vile racist views and advocated for violence, all to support their extreme right-wing mindset. Some of their defence in court was that it was all fantasy or just part of harmless chats. However, all 3 took real-world steps to plan and prepare for carrying out an attack on innocent citizens. The group named themselves Einsatz 14 in their Telegram channel, a reference to the 14 Nazi 14 words, and the Einsatzgruppen, literally deployment groups, the Nazi mobile killing squads used to carry out genocide in Eastern Europe during World War II. They espoused white supremacist beliefs, including great replacement rhetoric, and amassed an armory of over 200 weapons, including 3D printing the components of an FGC-9 firearm. Lewis, do you find it interesting how comedy is used as a defence, no matter what level? Extremist right-wingers almost never have the balls to stand up for what they believe in and have to hide behind half-baked, just kidding statements. Why are they always joking and memeing instead of just admitting what they actually believe?
Yeah, I feel like it almost ties to the idea of like certain types of men almost not being able to express themselves seriously. And, you know, you need to remember as well, a lot of these people are kind of like taken down this pipeline as well through kind of like jokes and memes. So it kind of comes with like a part of the personality in lots of ways. You know, Musk famously puts out a lot of memes, which are just little tiny forms of like radicalization. And by the way, he is like the worst at memes. No amount of money will ever buy him humor or likeness, because he's just terrible with it. But yeah, this is really common in the online sphere. So many things are done through memes in lots of ways. I've seen subreddits being banned for memes in like far right subreddits and hard right subreddits, because this is how people communicate now, in lots of ways. And it's really strange because we, almost like tying to the Gary Lineker story, right? We're talking about a rat emoji, right? It almost ties into the same thing, that there are people out there who communicate through emojis, through memes, which weirdly tie into like, bigotry and racism. And I think it's almost like harder for people to understand and track sometimes online, which might make it more difficult to track these groups. But I almost like appreciate it, and you'll understand this because we spend time online talking to some of these people. I just love it when they're honest with us. Like, don't beat around the bush, babes. Just say what you feel. I hate almost like getting to the point of like 10 minutes of question. It's kind of like, oh yeah, you think the National Socialist Party was good. Just tell me how you really feel when you first come in, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, I got completely lost in my own thoughts then.
No, you're right though. You're so right. It's like, just, I mean, I would want these sorts of people to be absolutely silenced, and like we need to kind of unpack these belief systems that they hold so near and dear to their heart. But I do agree, like, just be open about your thoughts, babes. Don't try and hide it. But then we see like the planning like this not be hidden in these Telegram channels and stuff. So, I mean, how much do you think Islamophobic, anti-Semitic, and xenophobic rhetoric is being normalized by the press and the rise of the new media?
That's a really good point. I'm literally getting up my phone right now because I made a video about this earlier and I haven't posted it yet, but I feel like I'm glad that we're talking about this, but I still don't feel like the media is painting the right picture of how often these types of things are happening right now. So what I did earlier when I was doing my research is get up all the incidents that I have found from the last month or so in the UK related to far right extremism. And I would be curious if anybody in the comments, maybe because you guys are so well informed and you keep up with these stories, you might have seen them, but I don't feel like anybody else is really talking about them. So we can start from the top with my favorite one from the month: 9 arrested over Hitler birthday party in Oldham pub. Man arrested after ITV News investigation exposed white supremacist network. And by the way, again, these are all from the last month. Nottinghamshire man jailed. I love how the police reported this one on the counterterrorism website, because you have to go right to the bottom of the article to find out this guy was a former police officer. He had like an arsenal of weapons in his house, quite similar to these three neo-Nazis that we're talking about. And then we have the story on the neo-Nazis, which we just talked about. We had the crossbow incident in Leeds. I feel like that happened and it just died.
No
This was
one
a guy who was
talks
driven by
about
extreme
it.
misogyny, who quoted the Christchurch killer, the mosque attacker,
Yes.
his
No one talks
manifesto.
about it. No one talked about it. Like, 2 women died as a result of that.
Oh, no, I don't think they died. I think he was the only one who died, but they were
Oh,
severely
they
injured.
got severely injured. Sorry, can
Yeah.
I just retract that statement? So they got severely injured. He died as a result of his own, like, using a crossbow on himself, right? Or am I wrong? Or am
Say
I
that
getting
again?
Carl Clifford mixed up? I think I'm
Huh?
getting Carl Clifford. I think I'm getting Carl Clifford and this guy mixed up slightly. Carl Clifford being the one that killed his ex and the sister and the mum, and then
Oh, yeah.
President Otley, who
Mm.
was fueled by a great replacement theory rhetoric and also misogyny, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I find it interesting as well. When I've noticed, like with some of these cases, there was one more from this month as well, which I missed, which was a guy called Tobias Gleed, 20 years old, also jailed for distributing far right terrorist materials. But again, all these stories have been out for the last month from some of the places that we've been talking about. The neo-Nazi guys, right? We had the guy from Nottinghamshire. We had the guy from Leeds. I feel like there's almost like, this is just from the last month. I'd love to see where these people are rising and kind of associate them with, like, working class areas, under under resourced, under impoverished, left behind. I'd love to see that, because I bet there would be a pattern there, that these people are radicalized in a system which has many ways failed them. And I don't want to make them out to be victims in many ways, but there is an element of the backgrounds of a lot of these people. It's very rare that you get like people at this level of neo-Nazism. There's white supremacists everywhere, from the upper classes to the middle classes, but this level of white supremacy, it does seem to often be associated with people who are poorer, impoverished, working class, and like almost like easier to radicalize. And
Yeah.
I think that needs to be spoken about a little bit more as well. And it doesn't excuse it in any way. I think it's just a interesting anecdotal observation that I've made personally too.
No, and it's something that we spoke about on a previous show, because I did report on the Otley attack in up in Leeds, and I think Cog and I were unpacking what motivates these people to do what they do, or what motivates them to believe in the things that they believe in. And I don't think we are victimizing them, but they certainly are stuck within within a system where they're victimized by the system. It's kind of like a weird conversation to have, but I think it's one that's mandatory to have, to be honest, because if we can't unpack what motivates them to believe in these things, then there's no way that we can dismantle it. And I want to move towards dismantling it. But I think we can wrap up the stories and head to our producer for comments. Hello.
Oh,
I can't.
Callum, did you add yourself to scene? Can't hear you, babes.
I can't hear you, babes. Speak up, darling.
I'm muted, that's why. Hello.
Oh, that's probably what it is.
Story of my life. I do that so that you don't hear me whittering on if I'm commenting on the stories as we go. You see, otherwise you'd have me in your ear making comments like, "Oh yeah, and we're supposed to be angry about Islamic extremism," which is what I was thinking when you were listing all those right-wing extremist events in the last month there, Lewis. It's like, yeah, all the things that they don't tell us about. Just before we start, I just want to say a massive shout out and thank you to all of our mods who have been doing an absolutely fantastic job this evening, getting rid of some of the little trolls that have been hiding under the turn left bridge. So thank you very much to our mods for that, and shout out to Specs, who has gifted 5 turn left memberships.
Thank you, Specs.
Specs always comes through.
Yeah, it's really appreciated. So thank you so much. Right, where would we like to start? Should we start at? Well, I'll just start at the top of the list, shall we? Or should we do it in story order? Let me have a look. Just on that last one, actually, talking about that list that you've just been through there, Lewis. Andrew said, "I didn't hear any of these stories." My God. Which ties in with what Rachel said as well, which is the media are afraid to talk about far-right white supremacists.
Yeah, I want to know, like, they get reported on because obviously I find them, right? The issue is that I check the counterterrorism policing website quite regularly because why not? That's my life. And you will see, like, there are so many far-right people getting arrested, charged, convicted that we just don't hear about. You search their name, they will be in a newspaper somewhere. Maybe The Guardian or maybe the BBC did an article about them, but the list of people who are reporting on them is very short. The second it is somebody related to, Islamism or Islamic ideology, that person will be massively reported on. And I'm not talking about an actual full-blown, terrorist attack. I'm talking about, a person was arrested for having material, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the difference is very stark about when people from different ideologies gets arrested and how they get reported on. And the fact that a guy can have an arsenal of like 100 weapons, like the Nottinghamshire ex-police officer, doesn't get that much coverage versus an Islamic extremist who had material online. Which one are you more afraid of out of those two? And which one do you think deserves more reporting out of those two suspects? It's frustrating.
It is frustrating, but I also think that the British media, I'll speak about British media particularly, thrives off of that manufactured binary where it's like Muslim equals terrorist, white individual equals lone wolf. And I think it's important to look at that binary that's created. When white supremacists like the one that we analysed today plan a really, really horrific murder or harm, headlines will tend to veer towards things like, isolation or online radicalization or mental health. But if the suspect is brown or Muslim, then I think that it kind of is a very, very different story. But I think in answer to the question about why does the media avoid, I think, or routinely downplay white supremacy, I think because white supremacy in the UK is actually a system, like it's not just some outward scandal. So I think that might be a reason why as well.
But this is the same across the board, by the way. There was a person who a few weeks ago did a video very similar to what I'm about to post, but for France, about talking about like 3 or 4 white supremacist neo-Nazi attacks that happened in the space of the week, and it barely got reported on. It's not just the UK media, it's pretty widespread about the bias towards these stories.
It's deliberate, though, isn't it? Because they're trying to push a particular narrative, and they want they. There's also that element, though, I suppose, isn't there? Of it is quite commonplace. I mean, if you look at the way that America reports on school shootings, for example, they happen that often. That shootings can happen day in day, not necessarily school ones, but shootings can happen on a daily basis in the States, and there just will be no media coverage of it because it's just a commonplace thing that happens. That it just happens that regularly that often they don't bother. And I do think that there might be an element of that as well with the rise of the far right and some of the attacks that people are carrying out. They're always very keen to and very quick to report on it when the perpetrator is not white British, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
I'm just aware of time, so I'm just going to move on onto Eurovision. Well, firstly, first of 2 comments from Adam B. Eurovision did deliver ABBA to us, which makes it worth it to me.
And Celine Dion, thank you.
Celine Dion.
And Celine Dion. So yeah, I mean, I completely agree with that.
I used to love Eurovision.
I'm going to do a note to what's his face who sang Space Man. What's his name?
What's his name? What was that? Sam Fender?
He's a TikToker. Sam Ryder.
Sam Ryder.
Sam Ryder.
Like, I'm not just saying this to be all like UK. He would have won that year if it wasn't what was happening in Ukraine. Exactly. But that's not to say that Ukraine didn't also deserve to win. I just want to say that it's true.
We won anyway, and we got to host it in Liverpool, and it was a fabulous camp time that everyone enjoyed. So
I also went to the Graham Norton show and saw him sing that live.
Did you really?
Yeah.
I used to watch the Graham Norton show all the time. This happens. Guys, this happens all the time in our meetings as well. We'll just spend 30 minutes talking about absolutely
cheeky Graham Norton cameo in a particularly good sci-fi drama that was on at the weekend. No spoilers for anyone that's not seen it yet. But
Becca, can I just do this? Becca, I'm gonna need more context. I just saw this. I'm gonna need more context. Like, please follow up.
Oh, not the doggers. I'm going opposite way. I had condoms thrown in my van by a legless gammon man. Doggers, back off!
Oh my god!
Are you in the right stream there, Becca? I think.
Gonna need more context, Becca.
I would want to hear the context for that. Actually,
we'll come back to that in a moment and see whether we've got a response. Back to Adam though. I don't like the banning of individuals based on the government's actions. England would have been banned from World Cups during Iraq War under that rule. I both agree and disagree with that comment. I don't know what you guys think, but I think, and you explained it quite well, Lewis, in terms of the rules and the reasoning, because I often get very frustrated with the fact that Russia have been banned, but Israel haven't, given what's going on. But I wasn't aware of actually the rules around the broadcasting thing and how you explained it before. I get it to an extent. I think it's not the fault of the singer, it's not the fault of the artist. As a performer myself by trade, I completely understand that an artist is an artist, and it's not their fault that the country that they are representing is doing something terrible and awful. However, there is something a bit sickening about celebrating a country and putting them on a pedestal when their government are committing such heinous and cruel acts as the contest is going on. I think if it was an historic thing, maybe, but I think given it's going on right now, I do have an issue with the way that we're expected to celebrate the achievements of a country that is literally killing people, innocent people, in some of the most horrific ways on a daily basis.
Yeah, and it's also, again, I'm not defending the rules, but when you actually have to think about like how do you adjudicate that as a European broadcaster, that's probably the difficult part as well. And I'm not saying that they should be in, but it again ties back to that idea of like a court hasn't probably adjudicated this, yada yada yada. And it sounds like I'm making quick excuses, but I imagine as well, like, obviously, I hate saying this, but it's obviously a difficult position for these broadcasters to be in, because again, these are broadcasters who are funded by the government. How do you adjudicate who gets to be in and out?
Sorry
But
to
the reason I'm
interrupt
saying
you,
that as well is because, again, like, somebody brought up the Iraq War, right? That's gone through various, like, hearings and trials, and nobody's been held accountable for it. So it's frustrating,
but
because
there's a really
how do you make the decision? Because
Lewis,
lots of countries in Europe do very bad things.
really easy answer though. I'm sorry I'm interrupting you, but there's a really, really easy answer to this. It's Eurovision. So just go back to how it used to be, where you only allow people that are in Europe, countries that are in Europe, to compete. Israel won't be allowed to compete. Okay, that'll also exclude Australia. I think there's a couple of others in there as well. But rather than making it about if they're trying to, if they're having issues with how it gets adjudicated, just stop countries that aren't in Europe from competing like it used to be, and then it solves the problem. Until the European countries start committing genocide, and then
Well, we do. That's the thing. We're complicit too. So if we're
We are
complicit and we're supporting it, does the UK get kicked out too? And I'm not trying to say that's like this, so it shouldn't happen that way. But it's like, I get how complicated it is, and maybe they should look at the rules. And maybe like when something's pending against a country, for example, I don't know, an ICC arrest warrant. Maybe if the leader of the country's got an outstanding arrest warrant for war crimes, that could disqualify them until that's adjudicated. Perhaps, maybe, I don't know. Like, I would want a process to do it, but I sympathize with how hard it is with the current position and rules that they're in. At the same time, it's very frustrating. I know it's not what people want to hear, but it is difficult at the same time.
It is difficult, but we can't forget that the European Broadcasting Union had literally said, well, if we ban Israel, then it's going to look like we politicize the contest. But it's already quite a political contest, and we spoke about soft power and the things that they're capable of doing in Eurovision. But I do think also inviting a state that is currently under investigation, I think that's already quite a political act, is it not?
Well, I mean, Simon made an interesting point just now. He said if you opposed genocide, you wouldn't represent your country while they were committing it. Now, I appreciate that the artist in question that represented Israel this time is a survivor of the October 7th attack, and I acknowledge that what went on there. I mean, I got a bit of stick on here, but I stand by the fact that it was a terrorist attack, and obviously what happened that day shouldn't have happened. It has to be taken into context of the wider conflict and the years of genocide and ongoing slaughter of the Palestinian people as well. But has Simon got something? Is Simon onto something there? I mean, if I was asked to represent the UK on a national scale, and we were literally slaughtering innocent people on a daily basis, I'd be telling the country to fuck off. I wouldn't be representing the country. You're not going to see me.
There are plenty of people in Israel who are currently standing up to what's happening.
Exactly.
Yeah, just the other day there was a protest outside somewhere in Tel Aviv. I can't remember where it was, where there were a bunch of Israelis holding up pictures of dead Palestinian children to the IDF soldiers who were going into this building. I cannot remember the context. There are plenty of good people in Israel who are standing up to this. However, there will always be a candidate ready. Like, there's enough people who are pro everything that Israel is doing that there will always be a candidate. So I think there are ways to change the rules to stop countries like this from competing. I do think it needs to be looked at. But obviously, again, under the current rules, this is why people get confused with the Israel-Russia thing, because it kind of makes it look like Israel's getting preferential treatment, but it's not under the rules. And it's just the sad reality of the situation.
There's another really interesting point about this as well, and I mean, I don't know if people were boycotting or if people were watching Eurovision this year, but I did have the results on later in the evening, and I was watching with bated breath in the last sort of 5 minutes or so when Israel were essentially at the top of the leaderboard, and it came to the final count of the vote before Austria pipped them to the post. But as Becca said, Eurovision winners have to host the next year, and lots of countries will be conflicted sending acts there at the moment. There was already a lot of controversy. Graham Norton got into, people were slagging him off on Twitter because he dared mention when Israel started their performances that there was a lot of controversy around Israel's participation in the event. That's not bias. That's just fact. There is a lot of controversy about Israel's involvement in the event. But had they won, it could have completely destroyed the Eurovision Song Contest, because I do think that it's one thing competing against Israel while the genocide's ongoing. I think it's another thing going to Israel to compete in the country that is responsible for said genocide. I mean, hypothetical world. Austria didn't get enough points. They got 99 points instead of the 170 or whatever it was that got them across the line. Would that have been the end of Eurovision, do you think?
I don't know. I think Eurovision's kind of been coming towards a bit of a slow burner already, to be honest. I think people have kind of been against Eurovision since for a while, because it has been political. You've got countries that basically just vote for their neighbours. You've got countries that basically vote for those.
Greece and Cyprus.
Yeah, Greece and Cyprus, and then Ireland and the UK sometimes give each other points if they're not feeling petty. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like Eurovision's been slipping. But had hypothetically Israel had won, I do think that would have been it would have come to the demise of Eurovision completely, 100%.
Well, yeah, so basically, on the jury panel points, they didn't do too good because the song wasn't that great. Even in Israel, the song wasn't that great. It didn't chart. It didn't perform that well. It was just the public vote that really, really busted it up. But because the Austria song both got good jury and public vote is the reason, obviously, why they won. But it is just a case of pro-Israel supporters are organised. They didn't win, which is good. And I don't think anybody should be accusing them of cheating until there's any actual full-on evidence for it. And again, perhaps a push to review how certain countries can participate in the future who are committing atrocities, even if they haven't been adjudicated, because the fact of the matter is when countries commit atrocities, they're not usually often adjudicated, sometimes until decades later, which a country could be in a better, but I would hope so, but let's say Israel's actually a good place in 20 years and somehow they have a change of heart of what they're doing and who they are. Would it be fair to then punish them 30 years down the line? Because again, some literal war crimes and genocides haven't been adjudicated for literal decades after. So then something needs to be done in the meantime, but what that is, I just don't have the answer.
Just before we move on to the first topic, Zeke. Oh shit, Sarah with the burn.
Which one?
I can't remember. There was multiple ones there, wasn't there? Multiple
Which
ones.
burn, Zeke?
Which one? Remind us. And I'm sorry, but I've got to thank you, Natalie. I like Carl's voice on here. It's like the Morgan Freeman God voice, but sexier. That is the best compliment I have ever received, and I will wear that with pride. Thank you for that one. And this one here for Curtis is Curtis channeling his inner Freddie Mercury with that look. That's on the support video. You did look a little bit like Freddie actually in that one. I would have to play it again. Should we do a turn left music video next?
I'm down. I'm on it. I'll be lead singer.
Also, Zeke said, doesn't Turn Left have a surprise for us? Last Wednesday, Curtis let us know there was a treat coming up. There is a treat coming up, Zeke, but you'll have to wait a little bit longer to find out what our surprise is.
What's the surprise? I didn't even know.
Is it the thing later this month?
It's the thing later this month. Yeah.
Oh, are we not supposed to talk about
that? Well, we haven't been. I don't know if we are.
I haven't, but I didn't know that we couldn't talk about it.
Curtis just teased it the other day, so I just.
Okay, cool. Well, other things though, we interviewed Jeremy Corbyn at the weekend. We had a little quick interview with Chris Kunzler, which will be going up later. And I don't know, can we say the other person they interviewed yet? Oh yeah, we can. I put it on social media. We interviewed Zach Polanski at the weekend as well, like a full sit-down, hour-long interview, and that'll be going up soon.
Big things happening.
Lots of things happening, and it's all happening because of the support of our wonderful, wonderful viewers. So
yeah, all thanks to you guys.
Yeah, Natalie's just asked if Lewis is the new cast member in Magic Mike on stage. I don't think I'd fit into their costumes, to be completely honest. I'd be the friend that they're being kind to on stage to bring along with, but I think if anyone's going to do it in Turn Left, it's probably Cog. I think Cog's the best in shape in the team, to be honest. So, what does Cog do again? Is it jiu-jitsu or something?
Brazilian jiu-jitsu, yeah.
Yeah, there you go, jiu-jitsu.
When he's not working as a spy, that is.
Yeah, we have a theory.
And I missed this one just on the Eurovision thing. A bit sobering to learn. This is from Jacqueline. A bit sobering to learn from the Eurovision public vote that the UK seems to be even more hated than Israel.
I think we always have been. We've historically done shit.
I don't buy into this.
We weren't the only country to get 0
almost
points, though.
won because it was a good song. We should stop putting shit people forward. When we
No.
put a good person forward, people vote for us.
Yeah, I agree.
fair,
No,
I don't buy into politics.
No, I'm
Obviously,
sorry, Lewis. I do think we're hated. Like as someone who has been a Eurovision fan since God knows when, like I don't. There's something about us.
To be fair, the theatre kid in me has to just come and say, remember Monday, they are incredible. The vocals are incredible. The song just wasn't great.
The song was shit.
It's stuck in my head all day though, so it's catchy. But it's they are incredible performers. But as someone pointed out on Twitter earlier, unfortunately, it's a song contest, not a singing contest, which is a shame because they are.
think about it as well. Like it's always think about the culture secretaries at the top, right? For the last like 14 years, it's been like stuffy Tories who are like the culture secretaries who hire the people, who find the people for Eurovision. Like we need some like who's like the gayest person in Parliament. They need to be in charge of this. Like I don't know.
Who is?
Thingy's gay. What's his name?
Chris Bryant.
No, who's the guy who's
Lee.
under Rachel Reeves' glasses?
Under Rachel Reeves with glasses, no idea.
People know exactly what I'm talking about. Like young.
I was gonna. No, I'm not gonna.
Darren Jones. He's gay, isn't he?
Darren Jones.
Mama.
He's part of the club. But
Darren. Yeah, your Labour
he is
doppelganger.
a betrayer to the LGBTQ community. He's straight as far as I'm concerned.
I don't know who's gay.
I think Darren Jones is he gay? I'm googling. Oh, I don't want to like say it if he's not.
Anyway, moving on. Gary Lineker. Becca, I forgive you, Gary. Thank you for apologising. You're a good bloke. Don't fret it.
I will say, like, the minute that he started getting criticised, this guy was on doing a video immediately on Instagram, and maybe I do look really biased. I do like Gary Lineker. I think.
Sorry.
He's not gay, did you say?
He's not gay?
I thought Darren Jones was gay. He's not.
No, well, he's a shit MP anyway. But yeah, so what I wanted to say was I like Gary. I like that he apologized, but I also just want us to get into a place where we start discerning the difference between Zionism and Judaism. I think we harm the Jewish community every single time we slap an anti-Semitic plaster on something. I think it's counterproductive, with all due respect.
Paul's also said Gary's a great guy. Whether we agree with everything he campaigns for, whether we agree with everything he campaigns for, he's not the one committing genocide, which is also very true. But Andrew said, I don't think we should downplay that rats are an anti-Semitic trope, though. That wasn't aimed at us. That was a conversation I think that was going on in the chat. We should all stick to words when it comes to this issue. Memes, etc., will be our downfall, just like they were for Gary. I do think there is a fine line, and when we start using imagery, I think Andrews has got a point. You know, it was me, for full disclosure, by the way. It was me before the show that hadn't heard about rats being used as an anti-Semitic trope historically. I think if I jog my memory and I go back far enough, I think I do actually remember learning about this and hearing about this a long time ago, because I think they were represented in some of the propaganda cartoons at the time that the Nazis were putting out. But it wasn't something that was sort of at the forefront of my mind. And if it hadn't have been pointed out, it's not something that I would have probably picked up on. I'm used to hearing people use the term rats to describe people in a derogatory way, regardless of who they are. So
yeah, I just try and keep my adjectives like a bit more, like I'll just use like the words disgusting and stuff like that. I try and attempt not to like compare things to other things, just because you can sometimes get in trouble in cases like this. There was another instance, I can't remember which journalist was, but I can't remember who it was, but they often use the word like tentacles. It's like, oh, this person's got their tentacles all over this. And they used it in the context of talking about Israel-Gaza. And then somebody accused them of anti-Semitism because tentacles is something to do with an octopus, which an octopus is something to do with anti-Semitism. And somebody had to like show this person using this phrase for like the last 10 years of their career, like every other month, just to say like, look, this is a phrase I use all the time. I didn't know it was associated with anti-Semitism, but again, like this is how people can fall into it. I think it's just a safe bet just to try and use just particular words that don't compare. anyone to anything.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think stay away from certain imagery and stay away from memes, like Andrew says, and don't be a dickhead.
And also as well, you can sometimes become them by saying these words. Do you know what I mean? Like sometimes people go too far in how their anger shows towards a group of people that they're inadvertently stooping to their level. So try and be better as well when it comes to reacting to very emotional things.
Oh, I remember this. Graham said they also accused Greta Thunberg of anti-Semitism because she was photographed with an octopus plushie.
Yeah, I remember that.
You know, the
as
little ones
well.
that turn inside out with a little smiley
Yeah.
face. Yeah. Vicky said cartoon insects are also used.
But I just want to just again illustrate how ridiculous some of these organizations are. There was a report the other day from it was like a Latin American Jewish organization and two other organizations that work together from the Americas, and they used AI to analyze every Spanish speaker's social media posts from YouTube to Facebook to Twitter, and they accused 1/5 of the Spanish speaking population of the social media world of being anti-Semitic. And then when you actually looked at their report, anything that includes the word Zionism that is negative, they said in their report it is a substitute for the word Jew, and that counted towards the AI analysis. So 1/5 of all Spanish speakers in the world are anti-Semitic according to this organization, and this is how stupid and how far they go to make themselves look stupid and misinterpret and misuse anti-Semitism and weaponism. It's very frustrating.
And that's something that Sarah, that you always talk about, and you've mentioned a couple of times tonight, isn't it? About this conflation between the two words. Young has said, should it be impartial to call out genocide? If impartiality is applied on different topics, this shouldn't be one of them. He's showing humanity. I mean, it's this thing that we see very often from the BBC. If they talk about climate change, they have to get a climate change denier on to counter it. If they talk about trans rights, they have to get a transphobe on to counter it. If they're talking about what's going on in Palestine, they have to get the Jewish ambassador, the Israeli ambassador, on to talk about it.
Not always, though, Callum, is it? And this is the issue. Russia, there's no impartiality with Russia. It's accepted within the BBC that what Russia is doing is wrong. In theory, though, if you want to put like Putin and Netanyahu on the same level, you can. They've both got ICC arrest warrants out after them. So again, this comes back to impartiality. Why don't they get a pro-Russian person on? But if we're talking about another country which is committing atrocities where its leader has an ICC arrest warrant out against them, why is that still up for debate? I understand why it's still for debate, but I also think it's a really good point. And also, the BBC changed their policy a few years ago on climate change. They no longer need to have a person who denies or doubts climate change on their show, so they can make these decisions. It's just about how and when they choose to do these things.
Sarah?
Completely agree. Sorry, I completely agree. It's true. I mean, if you put Netanyahu and Putin alongside each other, similarities and differences, then you'd find that they do have pretty stark similarities. But unfortunately, it seems that. And it's happened. We've seen this happen all the time. Then silencing dissent. It's happened across the pond. It's happened here, where the minute that you call out for the liberation of Palestine, the liberation of those who are Palestinian, you are then rendered someone who is against the Jewish community. And I've had plenty of conversations with Curtis about it. I've had conversations with Lewis. I've had conversations with you and Cog. And I've just said, I'm sick and tired of reiterating the same thing over and over and over again, that Zionism, a critique on Zionism, is not a criticism of the Jewish community, and we need to be serious about protecting the Jewish community just as much as we're serious about protecting Muslim communities and marginalised communities as a whole. But it seems that at the moment, anything you say in support of Palestine, even wearing, I sometimes get scared to wear my Palestine football shirt in public in case someone thinks that I'm an anti-Semite. But I still wear it. But sometimes I get these really, really odd looks as though people think that I'm now going to say the most egregious things. But actually, I think calling out for the liberation of Palestine is, in and of itself, showing humanity.
Yeah, and I would just always caution anyone just to, if you hear anything, the one thing I always hear about, which is like, I won't say it's like full-blown anti-Semitism, it's just something that's misunderstood. I always hear like pro-Palestinian people, they'll be like, oh, why have Jewish people got their own police in London? And it's like, it's not as simple as that. Just go and look it up. Don't believe or listen to everything you see online. Go and look it up and read into it. It's not just like they have their own special police force that has any legal status. Just before you repeat things online, just go and look them up. Just please just go and read.
Yeah,
it's frustrating because this is when the cause in itself is undermined in lots of ways, because people might repeat things which they might not realize is harmful, but it kind of is, when you don't understand the specific like talking point that you're talking about.
Yeah. Just a couple more. Patman67 has said, love how MPs show outrage against Gary Lineker while being complicit in ethnic cleansing, show rage towards an individual's free speech while turning a blind eye to a slaughter. Shame on them. I mean, I don't want to downplay it. I think it's a little bit more than free speech on this particular occasion, just because of the connotations with the emoji. But obviously, he's apologised for it and said that he hadn't noticed it. But definitely, there is a wider issue here, isn't there? Of MPs on a number of occasions, historically going after Gary Lineker because he dares to speak out against a genocide, while they are complicit in it from within Parliament.
Yeah,
and it is interesting as well, because there's a hard thing to balance as well, because there are some MPs who have turned around recently. I think there was about 12 or 13 Tories who said something needs to be done about Israel, and there was that one Tory, cannot remember his name, he wasn't exactly prominent, who literally got up in Parliament and said, I was wrong about Israel. I've been in Labour, the Conservative Friends of Israel, for decades, and I can now get up and stand up in Parliament and say I was wrong. I think it is still, you have to hold that person accountable for their support in the past, and not necessarily welcome them with open arms, but at the same time, it's almost kind of like a fuck around and find out kind of mentality, where it's kind of like, oh, look at this person now that they've come around. I think we should have that attitude. If Keir Starmer turns around tomorrow and says, oh, we're doing sanctions on Israel, I'll be like, yay, good, but like, still fuck you for everything that you've done with support. But I think when it comes to certain other people, in the meantime, where we're trying to get to where we need to go to, if a Tory MP or cabinet minister turns around and says, I was wrong about Israel, we need to stop this and end this now and hold these people accountable. I think that's something that we should highlight in the meantime while still holding them accountable, because we want more people to take that step, despite the fact that they've added to this as well at the same time. But I don't know if that's controversial. People can disagree with me, perhaps.
No, I don't disagree with you.
Nope, not me. So finally, coming from Jacqueline, I see that Ben, one of the co-founders of Ben & Jerry's Ice Cream, has been arrested for talking out in favour of Palestine. Yes, Lewis, I don't know if you've seen this. I imagine you probably have done.
I have. He was in the news again today. He tweeted something else out. I'm just trying to get it up now.
I don't know what the opposite is of a boycott, but whatever it is, can we do that for Ben & Jerry's, please?
No, Ben & Jerry's have been on it for years. Years before October 7th. I can't remember what year it was. They basically suspended the license that they gave to a franchise in Israel, so they could no longer make like Ben & Jerry's ice cream in like the occupied territories. Like, this is quite a few years ago now, this story. They've always been on it. But yeah, no, they were in the news again this morning because Ben & Jerry's co-founder urges Americans to speak out against Israel's starving kids to death. So yeah, he tweeted out 9:56 p.m. last night, but obviously that's American time, so morning for us. So yeah, he's all over this. He got arrested in a Senate hearing for RFK Jr., and he's been on this for years, and he will continue to support it. And people should go out and buy Ben & Jerry's. I do, the gluten-free ones anyway, because I'm a celiac. But that's fish food, caramel choo-choo. Gotta love them.
Vicky has just said though, Ben & Jerry have stepped down from the management of the ice cream. I think Unilever own them and made them keep selling in Israel. I don't know if that's true or not, but we'll look into that.
I think something happened with the company where, like, even though they sold to Unilever, they still had some power within the company to do like the political stuff. But I think something did change in the structure recently. I can't 100% remember, but they were still doing activist stuff. But I think something did happen within the company, but I can't remember the full story.
It's also just worth pointing out, just on briefly around this topic as well, for those of you that haven't seen the news from a couple of days ago, which is that the co-op have voted to ban Israeli products from their supermarkets as well. Obviously, the cooperative is a cooperative. And
did you hear about the UK Lawyers for Israel story connected to that?
Oh no, go on.
So they were trying to oppose this, the UK Lawyers for Israel. This was in the news last week when the meeting was happening. And they were annoyed at a person at the meeting who quoted do you remember the number that came out for how many people were dead in Gaza from last year, where somebody predicted it was like almost 200,000, and it was in some sort of like medical journal or something?
Yes.
It wasn't calculated in the best way. There is scrutiny to those numbers, and they were annoyed that one person at this meeting quoted this one. And like, prepare yourself, because this is disgusting what one of these lawyers said. They said that people in Gaza should be thankful for the blockading of aid, because the biggest killer in Gaza before October 7th was obesity. So maybe by them losing some
Oh my
weight,
God.
that this blockade will be good for them. And that was tied to the Co-op story of them trying to stop Co-op from
Oh
boycotting.
my God.
Pretty disgusting. If anybody wants to read the story, just search UK
Delightful,
lawyers for
isn't it?
Israel on Google. I can guarantee it's
That's
the first news story
horrific.
that comes up.
Horrific.
Well, on that wonderful note, I think that's it from the comments.
Neil, thank you so much.
It's all right. Thanks for that update, though, Lewis. I wasn't aware of that part of the story. So that's what I love about us at Turn Left. We'll be, even when we're live, we always learn from each other.
We're
I find
learning.
we'll be in the chat, and half the time there's been occasions where we've broken news to each other just before it's even got out in the mainstream. So.
Well, do you want me to break some more? What I texted in the group 20 minutes ago. I heard Sarah's phone vibrate when I texted.
Yeah, it was you.
George Galloway has endorsed Nigel Farage.
Yeah. Have you seen?
Are you joking?
No.
So he's tweeted him. He said, "Dear Nigel Farage, you must lead a broad movement in the country against the betrayal of Brexit. Many, including us, will follow." And then he's gone on to praise Nigel Farage and talk about how he, and it's sort of an endorsement, how he and the Workers' Party were pro-Brexit, and it's essentially. He's also said. While we've been on the air, he said, "We have profound differences with Nigel Farage, even more so with his breakaway elements, but we stand with the 17.4 million Brexit voters with democracy and against the emerging fascism of the EU. That's ironic. We will unite with anyone for what's right and with no one for what's wrong." So he'll unite with Nigel Farage because of Brexit, but he's against the rising fascism of the European Union. Very, very ironic from George Galloway.
How many votes did the Workers' Party get at the last election?
I don't know, but he's no longer an MP again, is he? So is it like the 5th time now that he's been an MP
Galloway,
and then
I don't even know. He's not even relevant. He's not even a relevant guy. He just tries to always make himself relevant. And I'm like, you're the most irrelevant.
But the thing is that the people who follow him as well are really weird. He does have a decent following, not massive, but he's got a lot of weird followers. A few of them are on TikTok, and it's weird because what happens sometimes, I'll be doing something that's related to pro-Palestine, and then somebody will be talking to me, and then I find out they're a George Galloway supporter, and I'm like, ugh, I do not want you on my side.
Absolutely not.
And I'm just looking at the comments, when we hear those transphobic comments regarding people asking for litter trays in schools, we always remember that George Galloway pretended to be a cat.
Yes, he did.
I think it was a Big Brother thing, but that was Anyway, enough of George Galloway pretending to be a cat. That's it from me, so I'll jump down. Thank you both.
Thank you so much, Callum. You're amazing.
Thank you. See you all next time.
Take care. And that's basically all we have time for. I do want to thank all of you who tuned in and commented and liked and subscribed and donated and all of this sort of stuff. You're all amazing. This channel would not be what it is without you. And I want to thank Lewis, because Lewis is my fave. Don't tell any of the guys that Lewis is my fave. I love him. Just always so insightful. So thank you, Lewis. Right. But remember to like this stream, and if you're not a subscriber, then please hit that button. I never thought I'd say that. I always grew up thinking I'd never say hit the subscribe button, but I'm saying it now. Go hit that subscribe button. If you want us to grow, then you can head over to turnleftmedia.co.uk/support, and there is a link to our Patreon where you can support us monthly, or alternatively follow the other link to give us a one-time contribution. Alternatively, you can become a YouTube member for just 99 pence, but don't put yourself out as ever. But thank you again. I'm Sarah Dallal, and I'll see you guys next time.